This is episode 90 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Katie Neason. Katie is a real estate investor and downtown developer in Bryan, Texas. This is going to be important for later, so bookmark that town. She can help you and has done it herself, matching profits and passion with build-to-suit and mixed-use real estate that transforms small to mid-sized markets into locally fueled powerhouses of sustainable growth. I love that. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. This is exciting. I can't wait to talk about a little downtown revitalization.
I can't wait. And all of my listeners know how obsessed I am with Main Street mixed use. So this is going to be great. If not, it's just for me to talk to you the whole time. But I know I want to give the listeners a lot. Tell me how you got your start in real estate, because I know you come from a family that was involved in real estate from the beginning.
Yeah, I definitely didn't jump right into real estate because I grew up in it in the 80s. And so we went through the hard times, especially in Texas and California, which is probably, I don't know, before the Great Recession would have been the last downturn and bank failures, the S&L loan crisis, all that. So I grew up in that and we went through bankruptcy. My parents lost everything because they're in the real estate industry. And so the one thing that I learned was a complete fascination for money. That I assume came from that time frame, and that I did not want to be in real estate because you were at the whims of the cycle. So did what I was supposed to, went to college, got a degree, got a corporate job in commercial banking, and love that. Because of my love for money and how it's created, I got to go to CFOs of big companies and talk about money. And it wasn't even taboo. Like that was what I was supposed to do. So I actually love that, love the people I work for. Had my son realize, oh man, I worked a lot of hours, that I should try something different. So I actually jumped into a job with a startup company that took care of people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And what was important about that jump is that was the first time I really looked at my job as a way to learn what I wanted to learn. And the two founders of that company were amazing. And they were mentors of mine. I was like, dude, I just want to work for y'all. And they were like, well, I don't know what you would do for us, but surely we can figure something out. And so I went to work for them and they said, hey, do you want to do the real estate development? And I'm like, never done it, but sure, sounds good. And so that's really where I dipped my toe in the water of development, but it was totally different. And I didn't even make the connection until later. I'm a little slow. I didn't make the connection until later about how much that set me up, because I was buying commercial properties through commercial brokers that were just really already zoned and intended for commercial use. But it let me learn the processing and zoning and how to work with cities. And I did that for 7 years until they sold. And once they sold, once it sold, I think they called it quasi equity, which means you get no tax benefits when the company sells. You're like, get W-2 income, but a big old chunk of it. But it was just enough to say, hey, I'm going to bet on myself and do this for myself. And in a year from now, if I'm out of money, I'll just go get another job like I had when I found this one. So that's what I did. And I jumped into real estate at that point and started actually doing low-income housing.
But it's interesting because you said something that a lot of people said. You didn't even realize like how into real estate you were until you were all the way to almost the end of that cycle. And I'm like, wait, I can do this myself. Did those 7 years working in the development give you all the tools you needed to then expand it to what you wanted to do?
No, I would say it didn't give me all the tools I needed, but it gave me the confidence to know. I mean, it was a complicated system and I was able to figure it out. And, maybe any other job would have taught me that too. But the fact that they're like, hey, we don't know how to do real estate development. You don't know how to do it. Just go figure it out. Maybe it was their confidence in me to be able to figure out was probably the greatest learning lesson. But the other probably greatest learning lesson was I read, probably like most of your listeners, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But the epiphany for me in Rich Dad, Poor Dad was I realized my amazing parents, who are super smart, hardest workers that I know, their issue wasn't real estate. Their issue was they grew up super poor. They had way outperformed almost everyone in their family. They had gained great wealth and it outpaced their financial knowledge. It wasn't the real estate that caused their downfall. It was the ski boat and the T-top convertible and all of the things that we acquired. And that is what clicked for me after I read it. I was like, oh, I have a passion for real estate. My parents have built it back and done so well even after that. But it was really, that's what clicked, is that it wasn't real estate that caused the problem. It was the lack of financial knowledge at the time when they were making all that money.
Yeah, what a realization though, because I think a lot of people could look it back and think like, oh, that was a big failure, but you're seeing the full cycle now to success based on smaller things that were maybe involved in the whole part of it.
Yeah, it definitely gave me the confidence, one, that bankruptcy is a possibility and real estate is a cycle. And two, my parents are way more successful than they were before the bankruptcy. So obviously, I do not want to go through that.
Yeah,
I hope like crazy I don't go through that. But your knowledge doesn't go away and your ability. And I mean, I've already been through it once. If that were to happen, the
yeah.
confidence that I have to be able to redeploy assets and do it again, I saw that in them. So I know it's possible, even though I do not want it. I know it's possible, so it doesn't scare me into inactivity.
Your specialty is what you termed, and I think a lot of people, some will know and some will have never heard of it, urban infill redevelopment. So
Yeah.
for my listeners, just explain what that is and then tell us a little bit about what you do in terms of
Mhm.
redevelopment.
Okay, so first is the redevelopment piece. So redevelopment simply means that the infrastructure is in place and at some point in its life, that land has been developed before. So it can be a total remodel or it can be ground up new construction. That doesn't dictate whether or not it's redevelopment. As far as the urban infill, that means rather than taking large plots of land and recreating something new on them, we go to places where the infrastructure already existed and take advantage of that infrastructure. It makes the town stronger, and it's kind of like the heart and soul of what American cities were, right? And then they invented
Yeah.
the mall and the strip center, and it all moved out of town because that was the coolest, newest thing. But I think what we're realizing now is that was the fabric and the heart and the soul of a town. It revolved around that city center. And it was already happening before COVID with people being able to work remotely. But I feel like
Yeah.
COVID just escalated this desire for people to want to go back to either their town or a smaller town, but they still wanted the cultural diversity, the walkability, the vibe and the amenity that you can get in the core of a downtown. And
Yeah.
so it just escalated like this, I don't know, revitalization back towards small town America.
I guess the first people who start the revitalization are so important because they start the groundswell where other people know, like, oh, wait, it can work. And then they build off each other each rung because then more opportunities for retail means more foot traffic. But until it gets there, like I always talk about my town here because like there's not much there, but there could be. So I'm just going to figure out how to do it now. But those first businesses are really important to start that process so others can come in, right?
Yeah, I totally think the core of the very first steps, there's two things I look for in whether or not a town's a good one to go and invest in the downtown. The first one is, has the city put money in it? So
Mm,
lots of cities want their downtown to be revitalized, but until they're spending money on, restructuring the streets, planting trees, let them put money first. And then
yeah,
the first people to move down there are usually the business owners that are passionate about downtown too. So they have a shop, they own the real estate, they own the business. So it kind of makes sense. They can get efficiencies by having both the real estate and the business in one location. So they're
yeah,
kind of the first comers. If both of those things are happening, then I'm like, okay, this looks like a good opportunity to invest because the city, if they've spent money, they believe in it. But not only that, it's a bad investment if they don't promote developers to build in downtown, right?
yeah,
And so I call it the honeymoon phase. They're usually have grants offered to developers. They are doing whatever they can to help you. They're not worried about zoning. They're worried about what their vision is for downtown. And so those are the things I look for to see, okay, is this fixing to take off? Now you get to a certain level where lots of developers come in and it really starts getting the hustle and bustle. And now the city starts pulling back. We have lots of developers. We don't have to give grants. They start getting
mm.
stricter on the rules and they make it harder to develop. And the honeymoon phase is over. So I want to be in that sweet spot of the honeymoon phase.